All right. So, welcome to this week's, I don't know, not even this week's episode of the Fitfile podcast. So, we have a bunch to talk about today in terms of a lot of new trainers that happened or at least were announced at Eurobike. And then we also have some updates on the COROS Dura and some other random things that we want to talk about. So, Eurobike was just last week. And there was just a whole bunch of new trainers announced. I think probably the most interesting one to come out was the JetBlack Victory at $399. Now, Zwift obviously kind of broke the mold with the JetBlack V2 or the Zwift Hub at $499 a couple of years ago. And then this thing comes out at $399. So tell us, I guess, just give us a quick rundown of the Victory.
Yeah, essentially they've taken what it was a Zwift Hub and they've effectively elevated it up again. So this is a direct drive trainer. This takes a lot of the components of the JetBlack Volt V2, which is the same thing as Zwift Hub is built on, original Zwift Hub. They added a Zwift Cog, but we'll talk about that in just a second because there's some interesting tidbits there. And they've added things like Wi-Fi to it. They've got race mode in there. They've got pretty much all the extra specs that you would find at a higher end trainer, like $1,000 trainer. And they've got higher accuracy than the previous JetBlack Volt or Zwift Hub did. They really went through and checked the box of what can we add in this that your competitors at higher price points have. And this is, I think, one of the kind of neat things when you're still in, I don't want to call them startup mode because they've been around for almost a decade now or something. So not really startup mode, but when you aren't trying to sell a higher priced product, you're not limited by, cutting your own sales in the top end products. And so if a Garmin came along and did the same thing, they would kill their Neo sales, right? But JetBlack can come along and be like, yeah, we'll do this. We'll put everything in there because we can. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that for people that are not familiar with the JetBlack brand, as we've alluded to in the last couple of minutes, they were the company that Zwift tapped for the Zwift Hub. The Zwift Hub is simply a JetBlack trainer rebranded. It's as simple as that. And so this isn't a company that's unknown. And even before Zwift came along, I had reviewed their first edition Volt, and it's a really good, really accurate, really reliable trainer. And they just don't have the overhead of a larger company. They don't have all the marketing expenses. At Eurobike this year, they basically borrowed 3 hours of time from some totally random booth that was way in the deep weeds of Eurobike and the conference halls that nobody went to. They're like, hey, can we borrow your booth for 3 hours to show this thing? Otherwise, they didn't spend, $50,000 for a booth and staffing and travel and all that kind of stuff. They had one dude show up, the owner, and he had the trainer that he just put there on the ground. And he's like, there we go. There's a trainer, right? And when you're not spending that money on marketing, not just at shows, but at publications and things like that, then you can put it into this kind of stuff. So really cool to see here. But the notable part is that the headline when it went out was, $399 trainer with Zwift Cog V2. We'll talk about Zwift Cog V2 in just a moment. But one of the things I never thought to ask was, can you get it with a cassette, like a regular cassette instead? So while I was visiting his middle of nowhere booth, I was like, hey, quick question. You guys going to also offer it with the cassette? And he's like, oh, yeah, no problem at all. I'm like, oh, really? How much more is it going to be? He's like, nope, same price, $399. In fact, distributors and retailers, whoever else they can order right now for stocking later on at the same price point. So you can get Zwift Cog, which is limited to Zwift effectively from a platform standpoint for simulation mode. Again, we'll talk about that later on. Or you can get an 11 or 12 speed cassette, all for $399, your choice.
Are they actually going to discontinue the Volt V2 then at this point with this trainer coming out?
I mean, it sounds like it. I haven't heard any plans to continue that. In fact, Volt V2 owners will get virtual shifting as well at the same time frame here, and a few other features. All the software features of the Victory will go down to Volt V2 owners. Some of those features they had promised back earlier this year in the December-January timeframe, and they ran into technical and non-technical issues getting that out. But those will all drop whenever this trainer starts shipping. So it sounds like next month, basically, for that there. But yeah, there's... the pricing, I asked them, I'm like, are you guys making a profit on this? And they're like, oh yeah, normal profit and margins and all that kind of stuff. They're just, again, they own all that stuff end to end, right? So the factory and all that kind of stuff, their manufacturing partner there, they've got that to the point where their pricing structure supports that. And they've got the components that are largely the same they've used in the past. They did change their flywheel design. It's not technically a flywheel now. It's called a disc wheel, which is to get around some of the Wahoo patent issues. Patents that if they went to court, I suspect JetBlack would win, but no one wants to go back to court again on that. So they're just simply sidestepping that, and they've redesigned it to be basically like a slim disc instead that kind of sidesteps that.
Yeah, I mean, at $399, I guess I just wonder almost why they chose to go even lower than the bottom of the floor. I mean, it's almost like they could have just come out with this thing at $500 still, and it would have been fine. So I'm curious about the end game, and I'm also curious about like, what's the catch? Like, is there a catch at $399?
So I asked that too, right? I was like, why not $499? Why did you choose $399? And effectively, it came down to a bit of a marketing thing, right? And that at $499, now you're competing against the Wahoo KICKR Core at also $499, which was an older trainer and all these other things, didn't have Wi-Fi, etc. But for people that aren't really sure, they're like, oh yeah, I'll just go with Wahoo because it's a safe, known, trusted brand, right? And again, if you don't know the industry, if you know the industry, you know that JetBlack is a safe, trusted, known brand. But if you don't know the industry, it can be a harder hump to get over for someone new. And so this is here's another carrot in that pile, and they have the manufacturing costs to be able to pull that off. It's much the same argument that Zwift had when Zwift launched the Zwift Hub at $499 as well, way back when, right? It's the whole like, partially because we can, and partially because it's that added a carrot to say, yep, that's what I'm gonna spend it on right now.
Well, so the other portion of the JetBlack victory story is the fact that it's the first Zwift ready trainer that's coming out. So that's going to be essentially trainers that are made for use with the Zwift cog and Zwift's virtual shifting. And then the other portion of that is that it also comes with the Zwift cog V2, which is actually adjustable for chain line. So I got to see it or a prototype of it, I think a couple months ago. And it's really cool because it allows you to adjust your chain line without you actually having to use your barrel adjuster on your rear derailleur or, your axis shifter or something along those lines. And I think that's just huge. And it's interesting. It definitely does make it just so much easier from a transferability, I think, if that's a real word,
We'll go with
of your bike from the inside to the outside, so you don't have to make those manual adjustments.
Yeah, I played with it both on the bike itself, so on my regular road bike, as well as on the Zwift Ride, right? Because the Zwift Ride doesn't actually come with the V2 cog at this point in time. It comes with a V1.1 cog, effectively, which was a bit more suited to that particular chain on the Zwift Ride, but will ultimately be would have been the de facto standard until V2 came out. And V2 you'll be able to buy as well later on this summer if you want to, just as a standalone thing. But it does certainly help on the noise. Like, you can tune it just right, so it's like, okay, now it's a really clean chain line. But it's a minor thing, but it shows like Zwift is incrementing on hardware. They're not just sitting around hoping it all works out long term. And so, yeah, it's cool to see there. And you mentioned Zwift Ready, which is notable too, because it's really just the first company we're going to see in this space. And I expect over time, it'll be virtually every trainer company will offer a Zwift cog trainer. But Zwift Ready encompasses, that's like the branding side of it. In the past, they had Zwift Certified, which means that a company, basically Zwift just stuck a sticker on a box, right? At the end of the day, they said, yes, this trainer is certified. There was no true minimum threshold or certification there from there was no list that they went through and were they tested this. They didn't do what you and I do, right? They were yep, this works, sticker the box. I'm not sure if Zwift Ready is all that much different, except that it has to have the Zwift cog on there. It has to fully support virtual shifting. And within that supporting of virtual shifting is something that Zwift does test and validate, works properly in the road feel and all that kind of stuff. But the trick to all this, though, is that this is only for Zwift as an app, right? Meaning the Zwift cog, just like on Zwift Ride and other trainers that we've seen this in the past, it's only going to work in simulation mode with Zwift. So erg mode, something that Trainer Road uses or other companies that use erg mode, even like Ruvi, et cetera, you can be in erg mode. That works totally fine with the Zwift cog, no problems there. But being limited to just the Zwift cog is going to kind of reduce some of the appeal of buying that particular trainer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we'll loop back to that subject when we talk about something else that just came out or was announced here in just one bit. The hardware end of things, I think that's, obviously that's certainly coming down the road for a lot of different hardware manufacturers. I think the writing's on the wall on that one. But on the app side of things, definitely a bit trickier, but again, like Zwift is an app company and a software company at the end of the day, so it's like they came out with this technology for them to open it up. They're opening up their own technology to other apps, which obviously is not necessarily in their favor in terms of selling software. So yeah,
I see it both ways. I see that side of it and that they did that. Though I would argue most of the Zwift protocol stuff is things that were largely borrowed from other trainer companies already. Mm-hmm. And I think in this case, the same way that Zwift built their entity, their company, off of things like AMP plus FEC, which are standards, off of Bluetooth FTMS, off the heart rate protocol, like in order to have standards across the board, you have to have everyone agree to it. So I don't think, and I've long said this, I don't think it's good to have these walled gardens of sorts, because I think it ultimately hurts everyone. And I look at it as well from a trainer standpoint, trainer company standpoint. If I was sitting here as Garmin, right, why would I want to put the Zwift cog on a trainer? It would make that particular trainer more appealing to Zwift users, right? That Zwift people might buy it. But concurrently, it makes it more challenging for the rest of the app industry. So if you want to sell that trainer to someone, a Ruvi user, a tax app user, I mean, Garmin has their own app, right, that someone uses. So that they're like other apps out there, you can't do that. And so that reduces your total addressable market there. I've kind of, hinted a few times, I would like to see really, I mean, Zwift has talked about putting the Zwift protocol, effectively those features there, making it public and having a GitHub type thing where other apps can leverage it. They talked about it almost a year ago, and then they've kind of pulled back from that. We saw that in our interviews with Eric, CEO interviews that we did. And so it's unclear on where they stand on that. But I would think if I was the larger trainer companies out there that had something to lose, that would be something I'd be looking for.
Yeah, totally.
Now, a quick note before we go on to the next item is that this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. Both myself and my wife use them, but also Tour de France riders. We saw that in the last couple of weeks at the Tour de France, both on the men's side as well as the women's side, of course, coming up in August. I'll be checking that out because it starts here in the Netherlands. But of course, also around NBA and Major League Baseball players and things like that. What's probably notable, though, about Precision is they've got folks that you can call and ask questions of. So if you're trying to figure out how to, put together your nutrition plan, you can actually call their athlete support crew and have a legitimate 20-minute Zoom call with them where you tell them your race goals and everything like that, and they'll put together sort of a nutrition plan for you and what will work best for you. I did that for myself back on an event back a few months ago, and it was super useful. Now, from a product standpoint, all their products are Informed Sports certified, all are vegan, all are 2-to-1 glucose fructose, and contain no artificial ingredients. And most importantly, as I continue to say, they are actually totally edible. You can visit the link in the description for the free fuel and hydration planner and get 15% off your first order with coupon code FITFILE. Thanks again to Precision for sponsoring this video.
Thanks, guys. So speaking of other trainer manufacturers, so Elite, they announced a whole slew of new things. So they have a new Elite Justo 2, which that's basically their highest end direct drive trainer, but all they're doing now is including a 12-speed cassette, and there's also Wi-Fi built in, and that's basically the end of that story. So it basically includes a 12-speed cassette. So what's your thoughts on including a 12-speed cassette versus something like an 11-speed? Do you see that as being like a possible compatibility issue? Do you think that enough people are running 12-speed at this point that is going to be de facto? Would that actually work?
I think, when I asked the trainer companies this, they said the data is split, and it's really they can go either way, right? On one hand, if you're buying a $1,000+ trainer, you likely have a newer bike, right? And especially you talk something like the Tax Neo 3M and whatever that crazy price is and so on, right? you likely have a newer bike bought in the last few years. And that bike is likely going to be 12 speed if it's, well, road or mountain for that matter. And so in that case, it makes sense to offer 12 speed. At the same time, there are a lot of people, I think such as yourself, that just have effectively an old bike they put on their trainer, and that's the one that stays there the entire time, and that might not actually be 12 speed. I think what, Zwift, to be fair to Zwift, what they did way back when they originally offered a Zwift Hub before the Zwift Cog was they just simply offered both cassettes as a shipping type. In fact, that's what Wahoo did when they first introduced the Wahoo KICKR like a decade ago. You could buy it in multiple, cassette configurations.
Totally remember that.
I'm not sure how we went away from that. I guess the simple answer there is that it costs companies more to do that, but that's what consumers want. And ironically, that's what JetBlack is doing here as well, right? We go back to JetBlack and they're saying, yep, you can offer it in whatever cassette you want to buy it in.
Yeah, so I don't know, kind of an interesting decision to include a 12-speed cassette on there. You may or may not be able to utilize that on the Justo too. But I think even more exciting is their new Avanti trainer at $849. Now, this one is at the price point. It's a very quote unquote middle of the road price point, but in my mind, I think it really hits a huge sweet spot because it's taking a lot of the features that the Justo has and putting it at a better price point for people who were wanting something better than like a JetBlack Volt 2 or like a KICKR Core. They wanted just something a little bit more than that, but they didn't want to, go above that $1,000 threshold because that's been a big jump in the trainer market. There hasn't been necessarily something like in between, and that's where I think this trainer, because it has again like so many of the Justo features, like built-in Wi-Fi, it's got race mode. It does also have side-to-side movement, which I think it's a big one, but it hits a really nice price point at $849. And in my mind, I don't really know why you would buy a Justo, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't know either. Especially given that these are, as far as we know, the same sensors inside of them, right? So like they're nuancing on the calibration is that the Avanti is, let's see how they phrase this. Basically, like one of them they phrase as equal to 1%, plus or minus 1%, and the other one they phrase as power accuracy of, less than or greater than, however you want to phrase that, better than plus or minus 1%, right? So we're talking sub 1% accuracy on both of them, and even Elite's like, yeah, they're probably the same, but we'll just change the symbol in front of it, right? And that's the same that we saw way back when for their OTS sensor as well, on some of their other trainers in the past, where like my review, your review, Shane's review saw like literally identical accuracy between something like the Duretto XR and their higher end trainers, featuring the same sensor. And even though on the marketing specs, they were different, in reality, it was the same. Other thing that's notable about the Avanti as well is it is compatible with their Elite riser. So it's not limited to so like in the case of JetBlack, you can't use a KICKR climb going up and down or things like that, but here you can actually use that as well.
So, just to actually go down the list, I stole this off of your of your post, but basically in terms of, why buy the Justo 2. So the Justo 2 is $1,200 versus $850 on the Avanti. There's a little bit higher threshold for gradient simulation on the Justo 2. You get
Nobody wants to go 24%.
Nobody wants to go to 24%. We did, by the way. And, funny enough, I just ran across an article, by the way, on that Lick Skillet Road that we did going up to the Gold Hill General Store. That's actually the steepest gravel climb in, I believe, in Boulder, like in northern Colorado. I didn't even realize that. Yeah. So we can take that
foot road fun. I actually enjoyed that, to be honest. Right?
I know you did.
I legitimately found that fun. I would actually go out there and do that road again. I don't know. Like it was just a very clean, nice cruising road. I would, obviously a very steep road, but a nice cruising road.
So
Avanti is 18% though, but there's no reason, nobody wants to actually do that.
Exactly. Yeah. You get a little bit bigger flywheel. Did you actually get a chance to ride the Avanti, by the way, or
just with like street clothes? So nothing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So so you wouldn't necessarily have an opinion on actual ride feel at this point. Again, a little bit better accuracy. You get a little bit more on the flex feet on the Justo 2, a higher maximum wattage at 2,300 watts, which none of us are going to have.
No.
Yeah, I I don't necessarily know a reason why to buy a Justo 2 because, the Avanti, I think, comes with the convenience features of being able to fold up. It has plenty of accuracy, plenty of power. And I don't know, in my mind, I think one of the core features that I think should not be overlooked is the side to side movement. And I think this is a really big feature you should be considering if you're looking around that, that KICKR Core or Volt V2 trainer, is that those trainers don't have that side to side movement. And I think that's a feature that really can elevate a trainer and help you stay on the trainer for longer sessions. That's something that I don't think is talked about quite enough.
Well, I think the other reason that you should go with the Avanti is that it has the drawer for all the parts.
The drawer for the parts is so darn smart. It's crazy. Like I remember when we were on the media call for that, we're just like, all of us are like, that's so darn cool. Both of them do, to be clear though, both of them do technically fold. Their legs fold up, but they just, that drawer there is just like, again, I've literally got a drawer of trainer parts. I mean, you can see pieces sitting back there, right? Like it's just, and they're all in there. And every time I got to figure out which trainer part went which thing and hope I can find it again. Like for the open house this weekend, I know I've got to redo some trainers and stuff. And it's like, oh great, I got to find all the right parts for the right bikes, for the right trainers. It's just the drawer. I'm there for that. Oh, and really quick, we wanted to also give a quick shout out to our newest podcast sponsor, the Pros Closet, who's also helping support this episode. So you probably already know about the Pros Closet as being one of the largest and most trusted sources for quality certified used bikes out there, with over 600 or so bikes currently listed on their site, from mountain bikes to road bikes to gravel bikes. You name it, they probably have it. Now, the Pros Closet is definitely not just about buying some random used bike off of Craigslist or something like that. All these bikes go through a very thorough process of cleaning to drying to being checked over for anything that may need to be replaced, and then are finally tuned up by master mechanics before being professionally photographed and then boxed up, just like a new bike, and then you're ready to go. And going with the Pros Closet is probably one of the best ways to save money on buying a used bike versus a new bike, and still knowing that you're getting a bike that you can trust that's in amazing condition. And actually, if you have a bike that you're looking to find a new home for, you can also sell your bike to the Pros Closet, where you can get a store credit. You can trade up for something fancier, or you can, of course, get cash if your bike is accepted. But something that's actually back with the Pros Closet is their consignment program, where you could potentially get even more for your used bike versus their cash offering, where there's still a guaranteed minimum price that they'll offer you for your bike at the end of 120 days, but you could actually sell for more before that time comes up. And one last thing about the Pros Closet is that it's not just about bikes. They've actually got an entire retail showroom that's actually just a little bit down the road from me, where I live in Boulder. So you can actually stop on in there to check out all the new gear that they have, from helmets to shoes to components to plenty of the stuff that we actually talk about in this podcast, like bike computers. Anyhow, we've got a special code for all you podcast listeners where you can get $40 off any purchase of $200 or more. So just go ahead and check out the link in the description below and use the special code 2024FitFile40 to get that next piece of gear that you need. Anyhow, thanks to the Pros Closet for sponsoring this episode.
So should we talk about the last Elite thing?
We should talk about the last Elite thing. So the last Elite thing, and this is very, very interesting, is the Elite Square. So this is another smart bike alternative or smart frame. So basically, we almost need to come up with a new name for this little category that's coming out, because we have the Zwift Ride, we've got the Elite Square. I just did the review on that Caveworks Rivet frame as well. Yep. So this is kind of just this new category. And so anyways, the Elite Square, this is very, very similar to the Zwift Ride, where this is a dedicated indoor smart bike frame, which essentially, eliminates the need for you to have to bring your outside bike inside to actually ride. But it addresses a lot of the, I don't say complaints, a lot of the things that the Zwift Ride didn't have, such as it has adjustable crank length, it has a belt drive, so it's definitely essentially quiet, and it also does have gradient simulation with their Elite riser. The look of it is rather interesting, though. What? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, style is a subjective thing, and I think my wife has reminded me many times I don't have style, right? So I don't really know if I'm the best judge of that, but I wouldn't necessarily be my first look of a of a frame, visually speaking. That's just my thoughts.
I mean,
I like the look of there's some of the trainers. I think some of the trainers, I like that style, which even, by the way, even the trainers, people are kind of divided on whether they like that style. They're using the same design firm for all their stuff, like a third-party design firm, like a style design firm, whatever you want to call those people. And they've done it for all their products in the last few years. I'm not sure, like, I don't know. I'm not really sold on this particular style. I'm more sold on the technology, the differences that you mentioned, and most notably we'll talk about is that it's app neutral, right? Like it's app agnostic. It works across the board. But yeah, what's your visual style thoughts there?
Okay, so when I first saw it on that little call that we had, I would call it striking. So, no, I mean, no, in the sense of, if I were to go into like, somebody's house and see it in their living room, it would certainly be a conversation piece for sure. But I don't know. It's like it starts to beg the question of.
A question then. If you're seeing a really good baguette, like a really good looking baguette, for you, would you describe that as striking?
No, I would call that breathtaking. Really?
Okay. I'm just trying to understand the Des scale here a little bit. So I'm trying to figure out, okay. So then if you saw a really bad baguette, how would you describe that, the visually looking?
Oh, I would just call that sad. Yeah. No, I would not. No, I would not call I would not call the square sad by any means. I think it's just, again, I think it's one of those like, boy, if you were to actually, go into somebody's house and like at a dinner party or something like that, that would be certainly a conversation piece. Like, I think that, so it's kind of goes back to our conversation with Eric that we actually had in terms of, he said that, the Zwift ride, it was something that wasn't meant to be in a garage. It's something that it's meant to be in somebody's living room. And I don't know, that's where, the square, if you match that up with like a riser as well as a Justo, I mean, gosh, that would certainly get a lot of looks, a lot of conversation. I think just like what was their old complete bike that they had, the Futurista?
The crazy horse thing.
Yeah, the crazy horse thing, like
fewer pista, I think, something like that. Yeah,
fewer pista. Yeah, so that would be another like conversation piece there. So I don't know. Like, anyways, super interesting design. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, but I think functionally though, it's going to be really, really interesting on that front because it can be used with any trainer out there versus something like the Zwift ride. And so yeah, and so how does that exactly work in terms of the technology behind the shifters and how that talks to any trainer? How does that work?
So essentially, they're putting on a custom cassette in the back that uses the standard like 11-speed style cassette. So you can mount it to any free hub that supports 11-speed cassette, and it's got its own belt drive cassette in the back there. And the shifter side is working very much like a smart bike would, right? So you imagine a smart bike like a KICKR, etc. It's exposing that same thing and then commuting across FEC back to the rear trainer. Where it's going to get a bit fuzzy, and Shane and I were there, GPLAMA, myself anyways, were there talking to them about it and trying to kind of get clarification on some of those things while we were just doing street clothes riding of it. And the conversation got a little bit fuzzy in that particular realm of how exactly it communicates, what dependencies there are there, how well that works for third-party trainers exactly. Like technically, it all sounds like it works just fine. But the experience of how well it works with third-party trainers seems like we'll have to see on that one. Similar like with Riser, right? Riser technically works with third-party trainers, but the experience there can often be a little bit wonky with third-party trainers due to them having to communicate across the open frequency or the open standards as opposed to having a little more access at the trainer level. Like in the case of Wahoo's KICKR Climb, it's the trainer controlling the riser as opposed to the other way around, right? Mm-hmm. Versus with the riser, it's sort of inverted. And so that's where we'll have to see on all those things there. It'll be interesting to see on that in real life. That was one of the ones that Shane and I both came away from those conversations going, I get the theory here, but I want to see how this works, not on a show floor, in our own caves, like putting this to the test and seeing one, does it work well within the elite spectrum, which is, of course, the main goal? And the two, does it work well with third-party things if someone wanted to pair it? And I'm all right with the answer being, hey, Elite made it work beautifully with their own hardware because they have that, vertical integration. But then for third-party hardware where they don't have the ability to have that deeper level of control, they did the best they could. I think that's a totally reasonable answer, right? That's better than what anyone else in the industry does. But I would want to go back briefly, though, to the design. I do wonder, and maybe Elite has done this and maybe they haven't, if they were to look in the future at different design options that were maybe more mainstream / appealing to other people. I think we've seen a bit of the commentary the last few years on, like in the case of Riser and others, where people have been like, yeah, that's just not the thing I want in my home. And I wonder from like a sales standpoint, does that crowd outweigh the people who are like, yeah, this is my visual design jam, right? And I have a funny feeling that waiting right now is not in Elite's favor. I think there's a value in going with a Italian design theme, etc., whatever they call that's cool. But from a business standpoint, I would question. I mean, we've seen the commentary, right? Like the commentary is very clear across the board, and that there were very few positive visual feedbacks. So everyone loved the technology. That was a kicker. Everyone's like, I'm totally on board with this tech. The price point was ironically not a big deal. I thought it'd be a bigger deal than it was, but people are like, after seeing Zwift ride, I'm willing to pay a bit more for this this suite of technological, neutrality, things like that. But I do really wonder if down the road, Elite needs to rethink some of their visual design language philosophy.
Yeah, totally. All right. So I have 3 things to bookmark there, or 3 things to bring up based on what you were just saying. All right. So I guess first we're going to go with design. Then I'm going to talk about the universal trainer compatibility, and then we'll loop back to price. So anyways, design wise, that was something that I gave a lot of feedback to that company Caveworks about, in regards to their color choice with that tan color that they chose.
The biggest thing.
Yeah. So, I basically told them, I mean, the other comment was the actual like geometry of the frame, which, it's interesting for sure, but I understand the functional reasoning behind why they had to go with that sort of thing. Anyways, for going back to the color though, I mean, that was one of the biggest things I told him in terms of feedback was that, just make it an easy button in terms of a mental decision for a consumer. It's like, that's something that unfortunately that tan color, while it's not like bad, it will still give a consumer pause, to like click that buy button. And it's like, it needs to be something easy like white or black, where it's like, oh, it's white or black. It's going to be totally neutral. Yep. I can just click the buy button, where it's just like, oh, I don't really know if tan's going to be my color or not,
It reminded me of bad like carpet, right? You know what I mean? Like tan,
yeah. I mean, they said that they did a lot of research on it, and they were inspired by how sprinter vans, like some of those more adventure ready like sprinter vans, are that tan color, so they kind of went with that theme on it. So I don't know, like again, from a consumer standpoint, if you're looking to get it into consumers' hands, I think there's one side of it in terms of like being novel, like the tan color or the design theme of the square, but there's the other of just like make it easier for the consumer. So so anyways, looping back to the control over the trainer though. So in my mind at this point, it's like, Zwift, a lot of consumers are kind of waiting for Zwift to kind of open up that protocol of the virtual shifting with the cog and whatnot. I mean, I think at this point, there's a really big opportunity for an open standard to come out for some sort of universal shifting. So if one company or numerous companies could get together on a Zwift click style thing that could be used with any trainer that has a specific protocol, I find that at this point, it's a huge opportunity out there that would just basically allow these companies to not have to wait on Zwift.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that's, and I think, again, like we talked about in our the Zwift ride stuff, I think there's massive potential in the frame smart bike style stuff. Like we talked about before, huge benefits for consumers, huge benefits for companies, huge benefits for repairability, for swappability, for like every spectrum here, price-wise, etc., this is unquestionably the future of smart bikes. But I just said many times, I'm not a big fan of like closed protocols. I don't think it works out in the end for anyone. And it really limits these companies. We've seen that time and time again. And it limits how quickly it gets adopted, et cetera. And we're seeing that right now with some of the holdouts in terms of, companies that Zwift is trying to convince to adopt the Zwift cog. And this is one of the key things that they're looking at and going, yeah, I'm not convinced on this piece here. So yeah, we'll have to see there. I think that's something that, I think consumers can voice that feedback back. And I mean, at the end of the day, the vast majority of people are still riding with Zwift, right? And so people want the flexibility though down the road to say, you know what, I can use this with something else, right? Or say you have again, the whole idea of a smart bike, a big portion of that idea there is that you can share it between multiple people in a household. And you might have one person that's Zwift and one person that's another platform. And that's something that this would solve for.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets us to the last topic I wanted to talk about in terms of like price of these sort of solutions. So again, I think that there's really, three-ish, options at least that we've talked about that are available now or gonna be available soon. So, the Ride, the Square, as well as the Rivet. And they vary quite a bit in terms of price, and the reception in terms of price as well has been kind of interesting where, with Zwift Ride, people are like, I'm buying this thing. Like, there's no question. It's like, this is a phenomenal deal. And it really is. Rivet pricing has come back in terms of the feedback that it is higher than I think a lot of consumers want to shell out for. The Square pricing, interestingly enough, at $1,250, that's the highest priced option out of all of these realistically. And people haven't balked at that price. Like, I think they've looked at a lot of the features and it's like, oh no, $1,250 is totally fine for all those features. But man, that's a lot of money. I mean, once you add in a smart trainer, I mean, you're talking, $1,750 or something along those lines at almost the minimum at that point. And that's really, really getting up there for a solution like this. Yeah.
But it's still basically half the price of smart bikes. Right, like if you look at the cost of a KICKR bike shift at the base there, I think that's 35, right? Maybe it's 32, somewhere in that range.
Shift should be like three, something like that. Anyways,
yeah. Either way, these are all basically half the price or more. In the case of Zwift Ride, a third of the price of for a complete package, anyways, compared to the smart bike offerings today, especially now with stages out of the game. So I guess people look at it that way and go, oh, this actually isn't all that bad in the grand scheme of things if it's got, again, that compatibility across the board. And the other thing that's notable too on the Elite Square, while we wrap this up on this one, is that it does have better saddle or seat post adjustability. So compared to the Zwift Ride, right? So the Zwift Ride, you can't adjust the saddle forward and back beyond just that little bit of the saddle rails itself. Versus this, you can go, I'm guessing like, I don't know, I have to look at exactly, but a long ways, right? You can move it half a laptop's worth forward and back before you have to adjust the saddle rail. So that's something that people do appreciate if they've got quite a bit different size riders.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but you bring up a really good point, and we've talked about this on so many of the past episodes, especially recently, is like, at this point, is the smart bike or dedicated smart bike dead at this point because of these new solutions that are coming out? I can't foresee that market actually expanding at this point, with these sort of solutions out there.
No, I think there will always be people that want a very specific thing, right? But I think that market will contract really, really quickly, and there will only be a few players left. I think the companies that were looking at that going, this is a pain in the butt, are probably the companies that are going to leave, right? Like I feel like we've gotten over the last few years the general vibe from Garmin that the Tacx Neo bike has been a pain in the butt, right? Like in terms of all aspects of that. Like certainly we saw like the not recall like equivalency of like having a like. It feels like at every turn it's been like, we are offering this because we have to, maybe not because we want to. And so, and I'm knowing Garmin, I am sure that they make their profit margins, but I imagine they make way more on a given trainer than they do on that bike in terms of the actual margin. And so I would bet that if they can find a way to get to a frame style design, I suspect they would take it because their costs are going to be so much lower, and especially the support costs. That's the piece that really hard to like explain how much, Here's a good example, right? So Shane Miller, GPLAMA, is at home right now, and he's been riding my KICKR bike at home, the V1, right? And he's been breaking it, but it was already broken, right? My KICKR bike V1 is already, you've ridden it, right?
I was going to actually text him after I saw his story and say, like, does it still ride like one of those bucking bronco things at a bar? Because that's basically what that thing is. That thing is so clapped out, dude. Like, it's so bad.
It's gotten worse. Even him and his wife Vaughn got on it, and they're like, "What is up with this?" And I'm like, "I know, I just gotten used to it, right?" People pay good money for motion. You get free motion with this thing, and it's not supposed to move at all.
No.
So I need to call Wahoo. At some point, I will call Wahoo as a normal consumer and deal with that and just get it sorted out. But I know what the answer is, right? The answer is going to be they have to replace it. I know what the thing that's wrong with it in the base there, and it's not like something I can fix. And so they have to replace it, which means that I have to now I have to disassemble this into two pieces. Then they're going to send me out two boxes, the way it works, and then from there it goes out, right? Is this beastly 100+ pound thing. Then after that, they send me a brand new one, or another refurbed one probably, which they then have to cost a lot of money to get to, right? And like that whole process will probably kill whatever profitability they had on that bike when they sold it to me. And that's aside the saddle that seat post that Shane broke. I feel like I should put the video of that right there, by the way, of the moment when he snapped the seat post or the seat clamp lever there. My Nest Cam was in the garage and caught that. It was really funny. But that's where the problem with these indoor smart bikes come from. And certainly this was a V1, so it's going through all the teething pains of the V1, though that C-post design is actually the same on both, so it wouldn't be any different. But it's the same problem for the big companies that have been in that industry for a long time. When something goes wrong, it basically just wipes away most of your profitability pretty quickly on shipping costs.
Yeah, I had to actually pack up your last KICKR bike, actually. And, to be honest with you, the process was pretty straightforward. And I think it took me, 20 minutes or so. And, the process from a consumer standpoint, it wasn't too bad. But it's funny. It's like I have a smart bike that I need to send back, and I'm really putting it off as long as possible because I just don't want to deal with that. It's like I don't need to return it, but I want to return it just to get it out of here. And I'm putting that off as long as possible. It's like, it's definitely that last thing on the to-do list that, I don't really want to do. So yeah,
totally.
Anyways, speaking of Garmin though, it's kind of interesting on the trainer and smart bike end of things. It's like, they are just like, as you always say, like kind of like a submarine. It's like they run silent and run deep, and they're just like, boop, pop their head out and then just like, go, dive back under. Like you just don't hear about stuff from Garmin at this point. I think they're really missing a lot in terms of that budget offering and that mid-tier offering at this point. Like they have a lot of opportunity there. Like I think they're the only company that hasn't really had a good offering in that range in a while.
Totally. Yeah. Their Flux 2 offering is just it's not competitive with, it wasn't competitive when it launched, to be honest, right? It's not competitive now. Yeah. I feel like they could look at the JetBlack mold, or not JetBlack, the Elite mold there for the Avanti and more or less copy that, right? Like make a little mini Neo of sorts. And they've been selling the Neo 2T and the Neo 2 SC, or whatever they call the in-between model, for like that same rough ballpark of a price on perpetual sales for a while now, of like $800 to $900. You'll see it here and there, at least here in Europe. So it's certainly there. I guess I don't foresee Garmin really ever coming out with a competitive $399 to $499 trainer. That's just not their cup of tea. But they are leaving, as the entire market has shifted from $1,000+ trainers now to the trainers at $399 up to $800 are the bulk of the trainers that people need to buy these days. Like the trainers are so good. They are outperforming trainers that cost $1,500 just a couple years ago, that it's like, why bother to spend that money? That's literally money you could spend on ice cream and baguettes that people are spending on for this stuff. I don't know.
They're not afraid to hit that lower price point though, and come out with a lot of features. And I think the greatest example of this would probably be their Forerunner 165 watch that they came out with, where, that was, when I read the specs on that and the price, I'm like, wow, that's, they were obviously going, I think, probably specifically after the COROS Pace 3 with that watch right there. But I don't think they're afraid to go after that market. But
that's fair. But I think they are more limited in the trainer realm, right? With the 165, they have this huge telephone board of features and toggles they can go on and off, right? They can be training readiness, no, this, yes, this. There's a huge slate, a giant menu of things. But with indoor trainers, that menu is 10 things, right? That's all you can do. And their competitors have boxed them in now. You've got JetBlack obviously leading the way, but even Elite, right? Garmin can't come in and make an Elite Avanti equivalency that costs more with less features, right? People aren't going to buy that. And now Garmin will still sell a lot because they've got distribution everywhere and all that kind of stuff. But I think their competitors continue to box Garmin in on that mid-range into what Garmin will effectively have to offer down the road.
Yep, totally. All right. So speaking of COROS, let's really quickly talk about the updates to the COROS Dura. So at the time of this filming, by the time you hear this, you will have gotten the news that the COROS Dura, the actual, I guess, real ship date or official ship date has shifted. I don't know exactly what.
I want to use it's bifurcated. So it's split, right? Literally a split depending on when you bought it, whether you're not going to get it nowish or you're going to get it in a couple months.
Yeah. So basically, I think there's three things that are happening. This is so complicated. Oh my gosh. All right. So basically, tomorrow, people who have pre-ordered the COROS Dura will be sent an email where they have three options. And maybe I should back up to why they're delaying it. Yeah. I'll I don't know.
Why not? We can continue confusion. I mean, confusion has been the name of the game here, so we can roll with it.
Okay, all right. So the people who have pre-ordered a COROS Dura will be presented with three options, and the reason for these three options that are being presented is that they're delaying the official ship date to September-ish
15th.
Because they have found that the quarter turn tabs on the Dura with third-party mounts are susceptible to damage. That's what we've been told on that. So anyways, people who have pre-ordered the Dura have three options. They can keep their order and get the Dura and then get a replacement in September when that comes out. The second option is you can keep your Dura indefinitely and you get extended another year of warranty. Interesting. Or you can just get a full refund and then, decide what you want to do with your $250 from there. So they are officially shipping on July 15th, but only to people who choose to actually get it July 15th. So
and only those that order before this email goes out.
Exactly. And then after that, they're flipping the switch and basically saying it's no, you can still pre-order it for a September ship date at that point with the new hardware. So I don't really know what to say about this. I would probably say that if you did pre-order the Dura and are going to use it, I think that your experience is going to be a beta level experience from now until who knows, in terms of software. So I literally went out with the latest media release last night to do some navigation testing.
And this is a release that's supposed to be, it's theoretically going to be the release that they wanted reviewers to use for next week's launch. But now they're saying there'll be another release in between then and the launch by a day or so. I don't know.
Yeah. So basically, we both tested this, I think, yesterday and the day before. Yeah. Basically experiencing a lot of the same issues that we saw before. For me, the first 6 turns that were on my route last night.
Yep.
I think only 2 of those actually gave me proper turn notifications. Basically, the issue that we encountered when we were first testing it was that it would really be a left turn, but the Dura would say turn right for some reason or another. That happened 4 out of 6 times on my ride last night. And
you know, that could be a feature. This is like how to get you to train more, right? It tells you your ride's 60K, and in reality, you're going to make it an 80K ride because it just tells you to go the wrong way half the time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I compared this against an Edge 840 as well as a Wahoo Element Roam V2, and those were just fine in giving me the proper turn instructions. So I have no idea what's going on with this feature. Like, that was simply a Strava route that I built, which just synced over to all the accounts. So there's certainly something, I have no idea what exactly is going on the, COROS end of things. So, but again, this was a firmware that they told us would be media ready on this date, but officially, unofficially, it's not the actual media ready one, which will be coming out on the 15th. So, in terms of like content that we can produce on it, I think it's just like the original launch date where I don't really know what to do at this point.
Yeah, I'm half tempted to first off, I think they could brand that feature, by the way, the one where it shows the wrong way. They could call it like a checkbox. You could toggle, do you want to enable ride more? Right? And ride more means it just goes the wrong way each time. And then you have to ride more to loop around. COROS, you're welcome. That feature is all yours to take, branding included. Yeah, I think for my ride last night, I went out and did 60K or whatever it was with ride more enabled. And 80% of my turns were wrong. So literally 80% of the turns, it just simply missed or told me the wrong direction entirely. And that was, again, compared to a Garmin Edge device that had the exact same Strava route. So Strava route started on both of them, synced to the device. I will give them some credit on one thing, which is that they did add in automatic rerouting now, which previously when you missed a turn, it would wait some insane amount of time, and then it would pop up a note and say, hey, do you want to reroute or not? And it gave you 2 options, neither of which were awesome. And you had to manually choose those. Otherwise, it just hung out there. Now, within about 10 seconds in my testing, going off route, it would automatically reroute if your phone was there. But even that in the app was running, because of course it depends on your phone and the app and the cloud cellular connectivity for rerouting. But even that, like half the time, that failed in some capacity. And I had other problems as well. Same sort of stuff I saw in my initial thing. I'm in the same boat as you. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm half tempted to release a 3-minute video just showing the unit while I ride down the street of being like, this just doesn't work. It's as simple as that. I feel like this is one of those, you had one job as a bike computer, and it's to get people from point A to point B with accurate directions and with accurate data. And accurate data being accurate power meter data, for example. And neither of those 2 things are happening. And I will believe them on the tabs. I think you and I both found that didn't really fit super well in third-party mounts. So maybe that's just a reason to delay it till September. I don't know. If I was in COROS' shoes right now, I think they're only digging their hole deeper. As I've said many times before, I fully believe, knowing COROS, the history of the company, all that stuff, they are going to stick this landing eventually. And they're going to cause their competitors a lot of hardship and heartache over the next few years. But I think them rushing to market for no good reason, right? Just wait. You've made your announcement, push it and say, hey, we're just not ready yet. We'll be back this fall. And stop releasing dates. Every time they release a date, it makes it worse, right? Just simply say this fall, as opposed to saying September 15th, right? That's how they get themselves in this mess. Then come back and say, okay, we've solved all these issues. I mean, it shouldn't, you and I going out in a single ride, I made it literally 500 meters down the street before I had wrong directions. This isn't hard stuff to validate.
Yeah, totally. Now, actually, I have to say that the automatic rerouting actually was quite good and pretty accurate for the most part in giving me pretty good directions. But again, it's the limitation of just having, again, I think that the chances of you not having your phone with you on a ride, there's some people that may not want to bring their phone with them, but I would beg to say that it's 95% of people out there are going to have their phone on them, which is it's going to be fine. But you still can run into issues for some reason or another, I'd get an app disconnected message every so often. Yeah. So it's like, Bluetooth connectivity, it's not necessarily all the time with these devices. So there can be those times where, your phone doesn't actually have connectivity. And then again, like if you're out in the wilderness somewhere where you don't have cellular connectivity, that's a big issue at that point, in terms of rerouting, where you won't be able to get that. So I don't really know, going back to the ship now versus ship to September sort of thing. I think that a lot of people that did order the Dura, they're just going to go ahead and choose option 1 or option 2 and actually receive the Dura, because I think there are a lot of COROS loyalists out there, just like Apple Watch loyalists and Garmin loyalists. I think those are going to be the people that actually do want to try out this technology who already own a COROS device. So I don't think it's actually going to shift their view of the Dura much. I think they just want to maybe support COROS and try out this new technology that's there, even though it's not ready.
Yeah, I guess that's where, like, from a media standpoint, though, I would be, if I was in their shoes, like, there will be people that will do full reviews next week, right? I don't know. I don't think I'm one of those. Maybe I'll get bored and we'll do one. I don't know. But either way, if a review goes out next week, it's likely to be negative by most reviewers out there, I think, right? I don't know how you could have a positive review at this point in time. And as I've said countless times before, reviews never die in the internet. They are there forever, right? Because very few publications will update reviews after the fact to account for new stuff, especially at the speed and the rate that COROS is doing it. So when you auger in on a launch, that review is there forever. And oftentimes, those bad reviews are even worse because people will clickbait headlines and all that kind of stuff, and they're the ones that get the most attention. Versus if you remove that as a viable scenario, right? If they just sent out an email saying, "Hey, we'll talk to you in September," right? Like we need more time, hang tight till September. Then, well, one, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Well, we would, just to be different. And two, they're not going to expose themselves to media entities next week publishing reviews that are there forever that are largely going to be negative. So.
Well, I think that's what's the other portion that's kind of interesting is that, I think, we have received communication about the tabs and, the communication to customers and stuff like that. But I haven't necessarily poked to see what COROS's communication is going to be with all the original reviewers or media out there, like in terms of like, again, like a company can suggest what a reviewer or media can do in terms of like their content, in terms of like their early embargo versus late embargo sort of thing. But like at this point, again, like what's actually going to happen next week, because there are, so many of these units out there with so many, people in the space. So I have no idea.
I don't know. We shall find out together. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. So yeah, so that's the COROS Dura. So definitely look for some sort of content. We'll have to see exactly what happens with that. But yeah, so yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the FitFile podcast. Anything else that you want to bring up on this episode?
No, I think that's it. I think we got some good stuff coming up on the wearables front, probably for next week. Some announcements that have been happening this week and next week coming up. So plenty of stuff there to chat about. So yeah, so plenty of interesting things coming down the pipeline here. As a reminder, you can find us on Spotify, on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts in particular, on YouTube Music and YouTube itself. In the case of YouTube and YouTube Music, you can basically seamlessly go back and forth between those two, which is handy if you want to just not see us anymore and simply hear us instead.
Oh, you want to see our pretty faces. Yeah. All right. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks all.